There's no such thing as prior restraint in America. It was tried in the Pentagon Papers case and didn't succeed. And then he told me something even more striking. I said, well, you must have made a big fuss about that. He said, no, we can't make a big fuss about it. I said, why? Because the judge also said you're not allowed to report the facts. I've stopped you publishing it. Can you believe it? This is Britain, home of free speech, Milton, fantastic things, and here's editor of a great newspaper, The Guardian, told he can't even report it. I mean, when he told me that, I was on television shortly afterwards, and I said, you know, it's kind of tragic that The Guardian can't report a case of toxic pollution because of prior restraint, so it got picked up a bit, and it's now out. But that's an example. That could not happen in the United States because you cannot get prior restraint in the United States. Of course, if you publish something mischievous and defamatory, it's right that you should be sued, and if you're wrong, it's right that you should be punished. I've always accepted that the British libel laws, where we had to prove the truth of what we published, is a better system than the American system in this regard, that in America, if you're defamed or libeled, you have to prove your own worth, as it were. Whereas in England, it was the newspaper that had to prove. In other words, the onus is different. So nonetheless, I have enormous admiration for American freedom, and I don't want to see anything stop it. Sir, you've got a hand up. Yeah. Do you want a microphone? No, there's a microphone here because
I happen to be blind, that's why I'm searching for it. Okay, I 100% agree with you in the importance of good reporting and the crucial role of investigative reporting in a functioning democracy. Now, we are all aware of what's happening to newspapers around this country, not only going out of business, but aggregating into fewer and fewer control points. So my question to you is this. What do you think can take the place in the future of investigative reporting, good investigative reporting?
Well, it's interesting, but it's the key question of the hour, that, of course, because the newspapers, unfortunately, many newspapers across the country, the first thing they've stopped is investigative journalism on the grounds that it's very expensive. Actually, it need not be. And when I was editing that provincial newspaper in England, I had no money at all, but we managed to expose a man who was wrongly hanged. We managed to expose the cervical cancer story. We managed to expose toxic dumping. Three things, without any money at all to do it. I mean, we just worked hard. So I don't accept the excuse of expense, but you're right. Since there's already a marked collapse of investigative journalism, it still goes on, of course. And in my view, one of the criticisms I make is very often not made quite as arresting and interesting as it might be. Just length is no substitute for arousing interest. The editor of The Guardian told me that he makes £30 million profit on the internet. I said, what's the Guardian editorial budget? 70 million, which is made up by circulation and advertising, but there's a gap there. It used to be a very small gap, now it's a bigger gap. So we have a period of transition in which the question is, can the revenue from the web and from newspapers, from print, which will survive, and I'll just give you one small example, can those things sustain investigative journalism? Well, I hope, absolutely essential, that it does, and I do believe that that's one way forward, is that people of conviction will do it. Secondly, there are now two major foundations financing investigative journalism. They still have to find an outlet in their TV or whatever. TV, of course, has basically given up investigative journalism, basically given up reporting the world, for that matter. Foreign bureaus, you don't get reported. Just want to say one thing. If you want to know what it's like without newspaper reporting, you know already. You don't have to think about it. You know already. You know why? You're living it. You're living it now. And you were living it with the Iraq War, when it was not properly reported beforehand, and you're living it in the financial meltdown, which a few columns were written. Paul Krugman got a Nobel Prize, etc. But basically, a really good press should have been blowing the alarm bells about the balloon in housing, Zuckerman at US News, Krugman and Gretchen Morgan at the New York Times all did good work. But the general mass of television and mass circulation, nothing. So that's what we're living in now. Massive unemployment, terrible prospects, probably got 3 or 4 years of this at least. And the gangsters or banksters, whatever you call them, making out like bandits. So we should be enraged about it. I'm enraged about it. But I'm also enraged about the fact that if I'd just like to think, I can't prove it, that if I'd had my journalists at the Sunday Times, that we would have detected something. In fact, when I went to London recently, I spoke to Charles Raw, who was a brilliant reporter and exposed Maxwell's embezzlements. I said, Charles, why didn't the press sound the alarm about the financial meltdown that was going to come because everything was over-leveraged? You know, I mean, for $1 deposit, they were lending $300. So it just can't work. Traditional 1 to 9, as you know. So he said, well, I wished I'd had a paper, I'd have written it. But I didn't have a paper and I couldn't arouse any interest in it.